today we are going to be focusing in on just 3 verses for the most part, but they carry into it 2 different but yet complementary thought processes that we're going to dig into. One of them is the one that we kind of introduced by the song that we were just going into here, as far as the narrow gate, the wide gate, what the roads look like beyond those gates, where they lead, and we're going to dig into that. But the other part has to do with kind of what's on the screen right now, which is why I'm calling this particular message, Are You Smarter Than a 5th Grader? Or Am I Smarter Than a 5th Grader? Because it's about the golden rule. And I don't know, again, like your backgrounds, my background, like the golden rule was a big deal in my 5th grade class. Like Mrs. Gross just was really big. We had the poster up on the wall and everybody's supposed to follow it. And it's probably mostly from the understanding of please don't beat each other when I'm not looking type, standpoint, like let's try to keep the kids under control. But it's a very common rule that we have grown up with that we're going to dig into today and hopefully go deeper than what some of us have gotten into it before. Okay, so those are the 2 main things that we're covering in Matthew 7. So if you want to get into in there, we can get into that. Matthew 7, verses 12 through 14. And while you're turning, every week I always do recap, just simply because I'm aware that sometimes we were here last week, sometimes we weren't, sometimes we have visitors, and just kind of want to do on-ramps for everybody. Make sure we're on the same page when we get together. But I want to go a little bit bigger with the recap this time because I don't want us to forget, especially as we're coming in towards the end of it, that this series that we've been into, the study we've been going into, the focus that we've had has been going on since last January. If you remember, if you were around during that time, that usually, not every year, but most years, I end up taking some time away, just sabbatical time, just me, Bible, God, hanging out, just kind of seeking Him on the church. And there was some very specific things I just felt that He was leading us to and went through with the elders and leading the church in as far as God was getting ready to do more. We have seen some unbelievably incredible things, great testimonies, great areas that He was moving in for about the 7 or 8 months before that, but just that He was trying to prepare us for more. And for that more to come, we need to work on our foundation as individuals within the church, working together in unity so that we were ready to go with whatever He laid out. Because what we covered at that point was that whenever God gives a vision, it's good to see what we think of things, but then to kind of abandon that and say, okay, God, what do you think of things? And kind of see what He confirms within that or changes within that. And then once we started working the vision, we talked about how the enemy will come against it. So we had to learn how to build and defend at the same standpoint. So that's basically what we've been in. And I know it's easy when it's going over several months to kind of just like, okay, we're back at Matthew 7 again this week. But it's very imperative what we have been going through to get us prepared for something. And I'm not going to get into it real in depth, but there are things being revealed of what I think that something is going to be, and I think it's coming within the next about 4 weeks. And some of the things that we're going to see, and we're going to talk about that next week. How's that for a teaser? You either think I'm nuts and don't care, or you're like, ooh, let's see. So anyways, so we've talked about several things. We talked about the offense, that we are called to the Great Commission, that we are leading people to the Lord, baptizing them in the name of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, and teaching each other to obey everything He's commanded of us, discipleship, growing to be more like Christ. And that is our offense, that is what we're to be doing, and that the enemy comes against it, what that looks like, how to use the word and count on God and build our foundation on God to be able to stand against those type of things. We talked about what a team looks like. We talked about good leaders and what a good leader looks like versus a bad leader, and we've both seen both in our lives, right? We've both seen both? We've all seen both. There it is. You don't have to be smart to be up here. You don't have to be smart. But anyways. But, we talked about why it's so imperative that any leader is following the Lord first. And then that they are confidently, not cockily, following Him and leading others to Him. And to be confident in that calling, but yet also fearful of getting outside of His will and leaning into that will. And then we also talked about being good followers versus bad followers. And actually, usually all of us fall into both of these boats in different areas. But how to be good followers, how to take and be part of that and follow within that, but also how to offer ideas, but also release them, so that if a leader in a particular area, whether it be worship or youth or kids or anything, like how to offer ideas and then know that they're the ones that have to seek God on that, but then how to support them and how to move together. So we dug into all that, and then we've been into this playbook, and that's what we've been into most of the time, is the strategies that Jesus gave us of what it looks like to follow Him. And that's why we got into the Sermon on the Mount from the very beginning, and we've talked about our attitude through the Beatitudes. We talked about him fulfilling the law and how all those things work and all the examples that are there and drawing close to him through prayer and fasting and generosity and how to take and move out money, false attitude towards money and stress and all. We've been going through all these things basically because he's been leading us. I'm going to make the case today to the first verse of this. He's been preparing us for the first verse. The golden rule is not just a little fifth grade thing. It's what he's been building to this entire time. And that verse right there is going to basically complete his message outside of some postscript things. He says, by the way, I also don't want you to mess up this, or I want to warn you about this, and I want to warn you about this. And those things are always very important too. So let's read into them. We'll see where we're at. But things are coming to a head, guys. I'm convinced of this, that God's going to do something really, really cool if we lean into him, if we come together, if we devote ourselves. Okay, so Matthew 7, verse 12, it says this. So whatever you wish that others would do to you, do also to them. For this is the law and the prophets. Enter by the narrow gate, for the gate is wide and the way is easy that leads to destruction. And those who enter it are many. For the gate is narrow and the way is hard that leads to life, and those who find it are few. If we're going to focus in on the first verse for a little while, there's a few things that stand out. If you're a note taker, this is kind of when you say, oh, okay, let's take some notes, or let's take some notes. So a couple of things that stand out to me. First off, when we look at the golden rule, do unto others as you would have them do unto you. If you study kind of the context around it, if you study other things that are out there, this particular teaching sounds somewhat familiar. That there's all these different areas that different teachers have said something very similar to this. Like I made a list, and I'll look at it because I won't remember. And there's Hillel, who was a famous rabbi before Jesus' time. The book of Tobit, which is 300 years before Jesus. Confucius' teachings. Even this week, if we look at modern times, I looked up a video on YouTube where it had this organization had little kids talking about the golden rule from all their different faith perspective backgrounds, whether it be Buddhism or different things of that nature. But the thing that's interesting with Jesus' teaching versus all the other teachings is that he came from the positive element instead of the negative element. Basically, all the other teachings that had ever been out there that were anywhere close to this, that sound somewhat similar, basically stated, whatever is hateful towards you, do to no others. It's from the negative content. So, I don't want you to be prejudiced against me, so I'm not going to be prejudiced against you. I don't want you smacking me upside the head, so I'm not going to smack you upside the head. It was basically whatever evil thing I don't want done to me, then I don't do to others. But if you really look at it, you realize that Jesus' bar is here, and that bar is so low. It is so easy not to steal money out of your wallet because I don't want you to steal money out of mine. But to love on you when you are irritating me, that's much tougher. To give generously into your situation because I need people to be generous in my life when I'm going through tough times is much higher, much tougher to live by. Jesus took this very low bar, and again, that's what the whole law was all about, was taking that bar up and saying, whatever you want done to you, do unto others. Now, that could be a very flat statement, because if you're a masochist, that means you go around like kicking people and stuff, you know what I mean? Like, oh, I want you to hurt me, I'll hurt you. But Jesus said, here's the thing, I've not brought this up until the very end, because it's part of a larger dialogue of what it looks like to have your attitude right, to be leaning into the Lord, to be loving Him, to be submitted to His vision, to be adopting His heart, to take and pull out the things that take and cloud our mind away from that, so that we are completely focused in with God, and then being able to say, okay, now how do I want people to treat me? Now, how are people treating me? That's not the phrase here now. Just because people are being unfair to you doesn't mean you get to do back to other people, right? But this is how I want people to treat me as a child of God, living in this world, doing this mission. How do I want to take care of others? And it's going to have to bring in the fact that when someone asked Jesus, what is the most important commandment, that he said what? Love the Lord your God with all your heart, all your mind, and all your soul. And they said, you didn't even ask me. I got to tell you the second one because it's just too cool. And the second one is to love each other as you love yourself, which again could be a flat statement if you don't love yourself, but then you bring in the verse where Jesus says, love as I have loved you, right? He's like, I'm bringing you in. I'm getting all this other junk out of the way so that we can get to this point. Love others. Treat others. Reach out into other people's lives just the way that you would have them do to you. You, my child. You, the one who loves like I do. You, the one who has my heart. How would you treat others? That's what I'm calling you to do. It's a completely different element. It's much higher. And the second thing that we notice within it is that this really is a measurement. That's why it kind of gets boiled down to that golden rule thing. It's because it's a measurement. It shows us how our lives are today versus what God would call us to be as far as looking at this verse. I was reading a story this week. It was it was a fake story. It's not a real story. But where like a teacher had like paper boards. You know how sometimes I use paper boards up here to write stuff on because I'm like that. And she had that up there, and she was going to have the students basically take markers and make a 12-inch straight line without using any help at all, that they were just going to do it themselves. And they had to kind of guess how long 12 inches were and that kind of thing. And it's like the teachers in the house are already smiling because they're like, yeah, that's not going to be anywhere near 12 inches or straight or whatever. And then that's exactly what they found. When she got out 12-inch ruler and was going by each one, they were like, oh, they looked good before you did that, but now it's a little bit tougher. And I think the same thing happens to our lives when it comes to something like this too, is that our lives can look good until we measure it up. You with me? Our lives can look good until we measure it up to what Jesus has been calling us to this entire time. What he would call us to. Not because he wants to beat us up, but because he wants to grow us. He wants to shape us. He wants to continue to move us forward. It's real easy to say, you know what, I'm better than my neighbor, so I guess I'm close enough, and just stop and not feel challenged in this life. But we're to be growing to be more like Christ, and that doesn't happen if we don't let him come in and measure us and show us those areas that we are struggling in. And when we do it, it's worth it. If we look at, we'll put this up on the screen for you, it's Philippians 1:6. It says, I am sure of this, he who began a good work in you will bring it to completion. Now that completion happens completely on the day of Jesus Christ's return. He comes back and get us. But it's a continual process that he's trying to do with us. And again, it can be painful. I get that. I was thinking of the story C.S. Lewis shared in Mere Christianity. He was talking about being a youngin', and that whenever his tooth would hurt, like he had tooth problems, whenever his tooth would hurt, he would go to his mom and get aspirin, and that took care of the problem, and he was happy. And so the next day, when mom would call the dentist and make him go to the dentist, which is not what he wanted. He didn't like that aspect of it all because that was painful. He fixed the problem, but it was painful. So he would get to the point that he would not tell his mom about the tooth pain to get the aspirin because he didn't have to deal with the dentist. And you and I can become like that in our Christian walk. We can take and pretend like feeling convicted is something we don't want. But conviction is what God uses to lead us to new areas so that we can find forgiveness, freedom, grace, and maturity. That's another thing with that rule there. But the third one is, and this is the one that I'm going to be honest with you, I never caught it before this week. Never caught it because I'd never studied the Sermon on the Mount the way that we're doing it right now. So there's all these really cool Holy Spirit things coming out. And the main thing I almost missed, if you look at the second half of this, is he says, for this is the law and the prophets. Do you see that? Treating others the way that you would have them treat you, in the light of Jesus Christ, in the light of my heart, my love, this is the law and the prophets. If we go back to Matthew 5, which you're doing right now, even though I hear no papers, Tony. There we go. Matthew 5, verse 17, it says, do not think that I have come to abolish the law of the prophets. I've not come to abolish them, but I've come to fulfill them. And then he spent the entire time giving us examples of what that looked like, gave us the entire time how to draw close to him and all the distractions, everything we talked about. And he finally brings it back around to saying, look, this is the whole point that I was heading for. I've come to fulfill the law. I've come to fulfill the prophets because here it is. Love like I do. Love each other like I do. Take care of others like I do. Treat others as you would have them treat you. He's been going through this entire thing to bring up this one point. Tell me it's not important. Tell me it's not imperative. It's much more than my teacher trying to keep me in line in the 5th grade. It's a lifestyle that he beckons us to, that lets us fulfill the Great Commission, that gives us that integrity that makes the difference in lives of others, and gives us the freedom in the life so that we can take and find the things like the narrow road that he's talking about here. That's the second part I want to get into, because again, it can be hard living that way. It's different living that way. A lot of people, I heard a story, and this one, in all honesty, I thought the story was a little bit lame, but I like the point that it made. where a guy had stolen money from the place he worked at, and his bosses found out, and two bosses were talking about it, and they were going to fire his butt. And one of them said, well, what if he admits to it, and truly comes off apologetic and repays the money? Would we let him keep our job? Keep the job? The other guy's like, well, that's not the real world. Personally, as a guy that fell into that mistake, still fire me. That have every sense. But at the same standpoint, I understand the point that there's this mentality that we have that we think, well, that's just not reality. When somebody treats me like crap, I'm going to take it and defend myself. I'm going to take a fight against that. And then we think, wait a minute, not too long ago, Jesus was talking about us giving up our right to retaliation. Or when somebody takes and treats me this way, then I'm just not going to have anything to do with them. Well, we talked about proper boundaries, and that's true. But we also talked about giving up our right of anger and our right of fear. There's a lot of things within this where it just says it's hard. And I'm going to go very generic with this story because I didn't ask permission to share it, so I don't want anybody to figure out who it is, so stop it. Okay? A friend of mine talked to me not too long ago where a family member talked badly about them behind their back. It was painful and hurtful, and there was a lot of anger. And the old way would be, I'm going to lay down the law with this. Leaned into the Lord, did not do so. A week later, that same family member asked if they could go to church with them when they had never gone to church before, and there's a lot of story behind that. And the week that they came to church, they got saved. Now, if that person leaned into the right of retaliation, Satan would have won, and she never would have heard that message. She never would have had that moment with the Holy Spirit. She did an incredible act of grace, which kept the door open that the enemy was trying to close. Do you see how the golden rule works? But it's hard. Enter through the narrow gate. It's harder to find. It's tougher to go through. You might have to get rid of some baggage to get through that door. But enter through the narrow gate. The road behind it, it's a little tough. It's a little hard. It's self-sacrificing. We need to lean on Him. We need dependency on Him. That's the whole reason why He went through that whole ask, seek, knock thing. We need you, we need you, we need you, right? But where does it lead? Life. I can go through the wide gate. I can go through the easy one. It's easy to find. Everybody else in the workplace is doing it. My spouse does it half time. Not mine. I'm talking generically. Don't get Jenny mad at me. But you know what I mean? Your spouse might act like that. Your kids might act like that. Your neighbors act like that. Your parents act like that. Everybody else has treated you like it. It's easy gate to find. It's wide. Run right through it. It's an easy path that you would take and be able to blow up anytime you want to blow up, and you can get your rights whenever you want to get your rights, and you can knock people over whenever you want to knock people over, but it leads to death. Enter through the narrow gate. So with me? And it's not, let's look from a big perspective then a little. Obviously, entering through the narrow gate includes salvation. I mean, we can very easily take us into a gospel presentation, and as it well should. If someone does not know the Lord Jesus Christ, and they're struggling, and they're doing the things of the world, they need to enter through the gate that first time by accepting Jesus as leader, forgiving their lives, acknowledging He's the Son of God with the mouth, believing in the heart that He died and rose again, repenting, turning away from the old life and going into the new life. All of that is imperative. That's absolutely how you get onto this path from the first time. Absolutely. If you've not done that, please open your heart if He's speaking to you today and just talk to Him about it, whatever it takes. But as we continue going into it, we're going to have these moments where we can also choose that way that we're going to react within a situation as well. And I don't know about you. I want life. I've had enough death. I've had enough broken relationships that were broken for the wrong reasons. You know, there's still people, but on the other life, the reason that the one going to life is hard is because sometimes people will make decisions that are completely outside your control where they don't want you because you're doing things of integrity. And that's hard. That's why the road is hard. But it leads to life. And I'm telling you, when I've been in those tough situations, I know of many of them, and I can tell you now, a couple of years down the road, how God brought them back together and how He brought reconciliation. if you do things in integrity. And I can tell you other relationships where people still won't speak to me, that I'm still praying over. But we'll continue to move, and it's a tough gate to find. It's a tough gate to find. It's a hard road sometimes to walk. But I'm telling you, it's just a matter of conscious choice in doing it. It's hard because of some of the emotions come with it, but choosing the right thing is not that hard. It's just doing it. It'd be a lot easier if I just didn't tell her the truth on this situation. Tell her the truth. Just make that decision. It's a lot easier if I just shortcut it, and then I could have, don't shortcut it. Make the right decision. Be a person of integrity. Do the right thing. It's a narrow gate, but do it. It might be hard, but it leads to life every single time. Every single time. You guys, if I don't know. I'm going to share it anyways. For what it's worth, for those who have been following Facebook-wise and saw the prayer request, you know that enough that Jenny and I have been taking some bumps the last couple of weeks. Yeah, it's been one of those seasons. I truly believe, and you might think I'm back on this, but I truly believe some of the things that I've been going through the last couple of weeks between sickness and financial things that are hitting, some of the things that Mike's going through in his life as far as just the craziness of work and how it's affecting like worship and his vision and I've just been really impressed with this guy, just how he keeps moving forward faithfully. But because I'm convinced God's about to do something massive, then I'm convinced that the enemy's moving in a massive way. And and Jenny and I were talking about this last night, just in our situation, and I'll reveal a little bit to you. We have worked hard, making decisions to go through the narrow gate, go through the hard road, to have life in our finances. And it's, after the store closed down and everything that happened with that really rocked our world, and then we've been rebuilding, and God's been gracious and blessing us through that diligence of that process. Now, within the last 2 weeks, not so much. It's been a little different. It's some of these things we knew were going to come, but didn't know when they were going to come. But it's just been crazy. But we had, I think the first of it had to do with some medical bills that never came to us from Jenny's hysterectomy early in the year. They weren't coming because they didn't have the P.O. box on it in our post office. They returned them. And so that was like a $450 bill out of no place, and it's like, okay. And then we hired a guy because we're thinking about maybe he's moving somewhere out in the country. We hired a guy and said, well, we're not going to paint the house. Like if we were staying, maybe we'd paint the house, but we did badly got to get the deck and the porch done and the garage done. It was kind of chipping up. So we got to do that, and the guy came in and gave us like, okay, cool, that's fine. We used him before, didn't really have any concerns with it. It went horribly bad. One of those things where they're not showing up and showing up late, and when they washed the house down, they chipped a bunch of the paint off, so then we end up having another cost of doing the paint thing and attitude, just a bunch of stuff, and I don't do well with that. I have a very protected weakness with dealing with people that are not in integrity. My frustration level and depression just kind of like, overwhelms me. So I'm going through that, and it's like, okay, so we're dealing with that one too, and then the guy shows up to do the septic tank hookup because our town of Waldo is doing new septic tank system, so we have to pay to hook into it. And that I thought was going to be in October, so he showed up. That was a day-and-a-half job, and he wants $2,000. And so he's doing the job, and then we get a phone call from him. He says, hey, I don't want to freak you out or anything, but there's termites outside your house that we just found. It's like, great. So looking that up online, it's like, okay, if that's termites, that's anywhere from $500 to $2,000. That's peach. So, and then our air conditioner goes down. This is all within 3 days. Don't know what's going on with that, so we have a buddy come over, and he takes a look at it, and we're like, I don't know if that's going to be another $1,000 or not. And like I said, again, I'm on Facebook, I appreciate all you guys' prayer, because on Friday, there was an answer to prayer, answer to prayer, answer to prayer. And I was talking to Jenny about it, because I know myself pretty well, I think. And I said, if this happened before this study that we just went through, and I don't know if you've been plugging into it or not. I don't. But for me, when we went through the stuff at the store, there was times that we're dealing with contractors, lack of integrity contractors. Jenny would have to take over for 2 days because I was just depressed. I didn't even want to leave the house. And I don't struggle with depression on major issues, but when it gets bad there, that's where depression hits. I said, I'm tired, I'm a little frustrated, but he tells me I don't have to be anxious. He tells me I don't have to be stressed out. All these answers could have been negative. We could have been completely wiped out of our savings, and He says He has me. If I'm going through the narrow gate, if I'm going through the hard road, He says it's going to go to life, and it's worth it. It's worth it. And so if the enemy wants to knock around a couple of us for the next couple of weeks, and God comes in, and no matter what it looks like, if that is from a massive outbreak where all of Marion shows up at our front doors, or one person comes to know Jesus Christ in their life, it is worth going through every single ounce of it, because it leads to life. And the same is true in your life. The same is true in your marriage. The same is true in your family. The same is true in your outreach. So whatever you wish that others would do to you, do also to them. For this is the law and the prophets. Enter by the narrow gate. Don't just look at it. Don't know where it's not enough to know where it's at. Enter the narrow gate. The gate is wide and easy that leads to destruction, and those who enter it are by the many. But the gate that is narrow, if you enter it, and then you walk the way of it, which is hard, it leads to life, and those who find it are few.